What if I told you that there was a 26-year-old center who at one point played 36 minutes a game for a finals team, then followed that up by going 46-12 in the next season? And what if I told you that guy just completed a contract buyout to become an unrestricted free agent, yet there hasn't been much buzz? Deandre Ayton has turned into one of the most controversial players in basketball over these past few years, to the point where it seems like his unique skill set is more of an afterthought than a starting point for any conversation. But now that he's available, could he actually move the needle for a team looking to compete for a championship? One of the big drawbacks people often point to with Ayton is his lack of forcefulness. He's got a really high center of gravity and a lengthy build, and he rarely ever asserts physical dominance on offense. This leaves a sour taste in the mouths of many NBA fans because you'd expect your center to be the most physical guy on the floor, and that just isn't the case with him. He isn't a guy who's going to seal off low post position, make a power move, and dunk someone into the rim. He isn't a guy who's going to catch the ball with downhill momentum, drop a shoulder, and create a path to the basket. Even against mismatches, he's hunting for hook shots or turnaround jumpers over the top of light contests. And for these reasons, he basically never generates free throws. Over the last 2 seasons, he's averaged about 1.5 free throws a game, and the highest mark of his career came in 2023 when he averaged 3. Needless to say, in a similar line of thinking, another drawback people point to is a lack of motor. Especially on a team like Portland that wasn't really competing for anything, the effort could seem somewhat inconsistent, and many would say that's at the root of his lack of forcefulness. In my opinion though, it's just clear that he's much more of a finesse player. And what gets lost in all of this is that he's got some of the best touch we've ever seen from someone of that size. Like I said, he's often hunting for hook shots. Since the 2021 season, he's attempted about 600 of them and made over 58%, which is just a hair below the best of the best like Jokic and Zubac, who typically land in the low 60s. Another shot he's often looking for is a short mid-range jumper, and in the last 5 years, he's attempted 1,400 of those while making over 51%. And finally, there's the long mid-range, which is used as more of a counter for if he can't get to one of those closer looks. In the last 5 years, he's attempted over 500 of those at a 47% clip, meaning that we're talking about a legit 7-footer who can score very efficiently from multiple levels. This ability to make shots outside of the paint makes him a really dynamic threat. Anytime somebody drives, it's his man who's going to be rotating to the rim, so his mid-range shooting can be used as an easy outlet. And out of pick and roll, he's somebody who can burn drop coverage through his ability to step into 50% looks at will. Speaking of the pick and roll, another overlooked part of his game is the way he's able to extend advantages out of the short roll. If he catches the ball with space to drive or take an extra dribble, he's someone who can apply some downhill pressure, and more importantly, he's a quick enough decision maker to recognize and counter help, so defenses can't gain an advantage by simply forcing him to catch the ball in space. As a result, you're going to see a lot more traditional coverages against Ayton, which is where his ability to get above the rim comes into play. He moves remarkably well for his size, so he's someone who consistently gets behind his defender while rolling. He pairs that mobility with great vertical pop to get above the rim quickly, and more importantly, he has those athletic tools in a 7-foot frame with a 7'6" wingspan, so when it all comes together, we're talking about a guy with a huge radius as a lob target. Since the 2021 season, 87 different players have attempted at least 1,000 shots at the rim. Of those 87, Ayton ranks 3rd in accuracy, making about 76% of those shots. So think about everything I've said up until this point. We're talking about a huge lob target and above the rim scoring threat who's hyper efficient on hook shots and mid-range jumpers. And because he can hit these different pressure points as a shot maker, he's able to space the floor in unconventional ways without being a 3-point shooter. I mentioned how his mid-range game can serve as an outlet for drives. You'll often see him float around that free throw line area and wait for passes. And of course, he can also space the floor vertically, playing from the dunker spot and punishing help by getting up for lobs. Does that not sound like the ideal big man next to literally any high-level playmaker? I should also mention that from the moment he stepped into the league, he's been one of the game's best offensive rebounders. Last season was actually his best offensive rebounding season in 4 years, averaging nearly 4 every 75 possessions. And it's hard to overstate just how valuable it is to have a big who consistently extends possessions by creating second chances, then has the tools to capitalize. So between the play finishing, dynamic pick and roll scoring, and offensive rebounding, Ayton's simply one of the best off-ball bigs in the the NBA as long as he's sharing the floor with an elite playmaker. Because of the lack of forcefulness and overall limitations as a creator, he's reliant on somebody to set him up with high percentage looks, and that's why his efficiency as a scorer has really dipped since joining the Blazers, or really since Chris Paul's regression. The problem is that he needs a very specific type of creator, one who can consistently create advantages on their own. And the reason I say that is for all of the scoring out of the pick and roll, he isn't actually a very good screener. Point to the center of gravity, point to the lack of willingness or even motor concerns, but rarely ever will you see him land a hard screen that gets a point of attack defender out of the play. So in order for his game and the team's offense to be maximized, that ball handler has to not only be a good passer, they have to be capable of creating advantages without a big screen. With that in mind, any team who has a creator that checks those boxes should be thrilled at the prospect of adding Deandre Ayton. For example, think of how much easier things would be for Cade as a driver if he had that sort of mid-range outlet as an option. Or think about how much more dynamic the Lakers offense would be with Luka having that sort of play finisher as a two-man partner. Even teams like the Bucks, Hawks, Magic, Pacers, and Pelicans, among others, could really benefit from having a skilled off-ball big. So as far as the offense goes, he's got some limitations, but has a very clear skill set that would benefit basically any decent team, and on a decent contract could even be considered a steal. The bigger question, of course, is what version of Ayton you'll be getting defensively, because back during those Phoenix playoff runs, he looked like a legitimately great defensive big for extended stretches, and the tools are still very much there. The motor can be inconsistent to say the least, but when he's engaged as a helper, he's a solid rim protector who can completely dominate the glass. That alone has serious value, and more importantly, he's capable of defending in the primary action. He's not super switchable, and he can get caught flat-footed in drop coverage, but his length and athleticism give him lots of room for error. And he's especially good at not letting bigs roll behind him, so at the very least, he's basically never giving up dunks. Despite the lack of physicality on offense and higher center of gravity I talked about, he's actually shown to be one of the better post defenders in the league, so he's also a guy who you can throw on elite bigs and expect good results. All things considered, it really comes down to effort and consistency. If Ayton's locked in like he was during the 2021 playoffs, he's not going to be some all-defensive caliber big, but he will be really good. So with the right pieces around him to insulate some of his weaknesses, he can anchor a good defensive unit. But on the flip side, if you're relying on him to carry a defense through paint protection like a Rudy Gobert or Victor Wembanyama, it just simply isn't going to happen. So is there a gamble with picking up Ayton? Absolutely. Unless you're a team that has an elite lead ball handler and some defensive pieces, he probably isn't going to move the needle. But if you check both of those boxes, there aren't too many bigs I'd rather have manning the middle. To me, Detroit seems like the obvious fit on both sides. With that said though, I also see arguments for the Lakers, Pacers, Warriors, or the Magic. Keep in mind, he's still only 26 years old, and if you don't see the vision, I want you to think of it like this. Forget the prior contract and assume he's on a team-friendly deal. Forget the fact that he was a number 1 pick and assume he went late in the lottery. Now think of this as a player at face value. A huge lob threat who's got elite touch in the paint and is a great mid-range shooter while controlling the glass on both ends and protecting the rim. To me, that sounds like a pretty good center and someone who can move the needle for a team looking to compete in the playoffs. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Ayton. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.